On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, which Western Conference player could be next to have a statue made honoring their achievements?
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we welcome you into the Western Conference Tuesday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. We thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On NHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, we'll take a look at which Western Conference players could someday have done for them what Mike Modano had done for the Dallas Stars over the last week with getting a statue. We'll also talk about Vegas or the Kings. If one team between the two is going to make it in the postseason, which one will be in and which one will be out? And we'll talk about Jets head coach Rick Bowness stepping away from the team to have a minor medical procedure done and why the team is focusing on the business at hand. And that is just signifying of exactly how Rick Bowness has put that team together. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked On Wild, one half of the dynamic duo here on Western Conference Tuesday. Nick Morgan will be back with us tomorrow. Nick's been going through a move, a job transition, and so he will be back with us for next week's show. So one more week of me holding it solo here, but obviously big news in the Dallas area over the last week as Mike Modano had his statue unveiled, and Modano certainly had a decorated career with the Dallas Stars. Led them to a Stanley Cup, and after the Minnesota North Stars went to Dallas, just had an unbelievable career throughout the course of his 21 years in the league, had 561 goals, 1,374 career points for Modano, who played 20 years of his career with Minnesota and with Dallas, 1 year with Detroit as well. And the ceremony, if you want to get a little bit of a further dive into the ceremony itself and the statue unveiling, Joey Erickson of Locked On Stars did a fantastic job breaking things down. So I would encourage you to check things out there. But it got me thinking, if there is anybody else in the Western Conference that is going to someday have this done, who? And there are a couple of names, I think, right off the bat. Two names that I think are synonymous with just insane levels of points and a real high level of play. The first one that I'm going to talk about is Connor McDavid. McDavid obviously has, since he came into the league, been one of the, if not the best player in the NHL. And you look right now at what he's done throughout the course of his career. He's been in the league 9 seasons. He has failed to register 100-plus points 2 times. The first time was his rookie season when at the age of 19, he scored 48 points in 45 games. And in 2019-2020, in the shortened season, he had 97 points in 64 games. But you look at what he's doing again this year, he's got 106 points in 63 games. He's got 328 goals, 628 assists in 9 seasons. Just insane numbers that McDavid is putting up throughout the course of his career. And the one elusive part to McDavid's career has been the Stanley Cup, has been postseason success. They got a taste of it within the last couple of years, 2 years ago, in getting to the Western Conference final and then losing to the Colorado Avalanche. And so that has been, I think, the one thing that McDavid has yet to achieve. And if he does that, people in Edmonton are going to, he'll never buy another drink. He'll never pay for dinner ever again. They will put him on a pedestal for what he has been finally able to do with that community. And so it feels like to me, the two things that need to happen for McDavid to have something similar happen. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into it beyond simply a player being good. Like there are a lot of other details that have to be lined up in order to have a statue built. But if McDavid stays healthy and avoids any sort of major injury issues, he's 27 right now. If you figure he's got, at least, if he can get at least 7 more really productive seasons, and the average season for him, just something that a lot of players never even come close to. His average season right now, 42 goals and 82 assists, 124 points in an 82-game season. If he does that for 7 more seasons, that'll get him up close to 600 goals. That'll get him, that will put him in very rarefied air. So health, and if the Oilers were to inevitably win the Stanley Cup, then you go from being somebody who simply has their jersey retired to somebody who gets immortalized in other ways. And so that's, I think, what needs to happen for McDavid if he is able to keep that pace up and avoid any sort of major issues with injury, and maybe hoist one here before all is said and done. Another player that I think is on a similar trajectory is Nathan MacKinnon. Now, MacKinnon has played 11 seasons at the NHL level. He's got 326 goals, 549 assists, 875 career points in 777 career games. His 82-game average is 92 points, 35 goals, 58 assists, 82-game average. And for MacKinnon, he has the cup. He just has, and it's not as though he's missed major amounts of games, but he has missed games here or there. And so a similar situation for him, although he's one step closer, I think, than McDavid is, because of the fact that he was able to assist. The assist sounds like I'm diminishing what he did in terms of helping that team get to the Stanley Cup playoffs and ultimately win the Stanley Cup trophy, which I'm not. He was obviously a major part of the success of the Colorado Avalanche. And so the fact that he has a cup puts him one step closer to getting immortalized with a statue than Connor McDavid currently is at. And so for MacKinnon, it's just a matter of continuing to keep the longevity going and keep his performance on a similar level to where it has been. I mean, you look at what he did in 2021, 2022 when the Avalanche won the Cup. Hit 13 goals in 20 playoff games, 24 points in 20 playoff games. If he has another run like that, another postseason performance like that, Avs win another Cup, he could be somebody that is certainly next to have that done as well. And these are two players in McDavid and MacKinnon, who have played their entire careers so far with their respective teams, with Edmonton and Colorado. And so if they stay with their respective teams, that's another step in the right direction to potentially having some bronze put up outside the arena. Again, like I said, there are a ton of other little details that have to line up perfectly for that kind of thing to happen. Let me know in the comments if there are any other players you think, because those are just the guys that are down the right path. There are players right now that are looking pretty darn good that have only played for a couple of seasons that could certainly push themselves into that trajectory too. So let us know in the comments which players you think could be on the path to being immortalized with a statue someday. If it's none, let us know. We move from that to a discussion about which team between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Los Angeles Kings, if you had to pick one or the other, who is going to be in, who's going to be out. We'll discuss as we continue today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast after this. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Sleeper. We are moving through the final 2 months of the season, and whether your favorite NHL team is already in the playoffs or is fighting like tooth and nail to try to get themselves into postseason positioning, you can still win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether your favorite players, such as Connor McDavid, Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, and Nathan MacKinnon, will record more or less than their Sleeper projections in categories such as goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, or more in a given game. It is so easy. You can set your lineup in under 60 seconds. And if you're a fan of other sports, you can play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, and college football on Sleeper too. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. The Western Conference playoff picture is starting to see the number of teams competing for that final wild card spot dwindle. Because as it stands right now, the Nashville Predators are actually in pretty good position as of right now. Now you can't say they're in because of what's going on currently with the Detroit Red Wings, who 2 weeks ago were solidly in the postseason themselves, and now they find themselves in a bit of a predicament. And so these teams are in good position, but things can change in the blink of an eye. The Los Angeles Kings currently in the third spot in the Pacific Division, 34, 22, and 11. They've got 79 points. Vegas is in wild card 2. They have 79 points as well. Both teams have played 67 games. The Los Angeles Kings are 5-4-1 in their last 10. Vegas is 4-5-1 in their last 10. Vegas has won 1. Los Angeles Kings have lost 1. Things are pretty tight for those two teams, and it's entirely possible that neither St. Louis or Minnesota have enough in the tank to be able to pass one of these two teams. But if you just look at what has gone on with these two over the last several weeks, they have been as in the case of the Los Angeles Kings, they've been about as up and down as you can be over a multi-game span. Let's just go to the All-Star break and look at how things have gone for both Vegas and the Los Angeles Kings. The Kings in 19 games since the All-Star break, 11-7-1, so 23 points of the 38 possible in that span. They're scoring 2.68 goals per game. They're giving up 2.42. Power plays at 23.4% in that span. Penalty kills at 84.1%. The Vegas Golden Knights, in 16 games since the All-Star break, they are 6-9-1. Their scoring is better than the Kings at 3.13 goals per game, but they're giving up 3.75 goals per game in that span. Their power plays at 15%, and their penalty kills at 81.3. And so the Kings have actually, for the longest time this season, the Vegas Golden Knights were one of the top 3 in the Pacific, and then they went into that 2-9 rut in which they only won 2 games out of a possible 11, which dropped them down into the wild card position that they have held ever since. But they're starting to get things back on the right track. They have won 3 out of their last 4, and they've scored in the 3 wins 13 goals. They've beaten the Red Wings, who are in free fall. They beat the Seattle Kraken 5-4, and they beat the New Jersey Devils by a score of 3-1. Their only loss in that stretch was to the Calgary Flames. The Los Angeles Kings in that same span have alternated wins and losses. They lost to the Canucks 2-1, then beat the Senators 4-3. Lost to Dallas 4-1, beat the Islanders 3-0. Lost to the Blues 3-1, beat Chicago 5-0, then lost to the Dallas Stars again 4-1. And both teams are in action here tonight. And so if you asked me which team is going to take that second wild card spot, or which team is going to take that third spot in the Pacific, and which team is potentially going to be out of the playoffs, it's the Vegas Golden Knights, folks. The Vegas Golden Knights, I think, will be the team of the 2 to stick in the postseason because it's the Vegas Golden Knights. They are starting to get back on track. They are the Stanley Cup champions of last season. And so with a month left in the season, if there's a team that knows what needs to be done in order to get themselves into position, it's the Vegas Golden Knights. And if they can get their goaltending shored up a little bit, they've been scoring goals considering they're missing Mark Stone, who is a huge part of the mix for them. If they can just get the goaltending figured out and more consistent, they're going to be fine. For the Los Angeles Kings, you look at what they have on the schedule here the rest of the way in this push to the postseason. The Los Angeles Kings, teams that are either in the postseason or are fighting for a spot: Minnesota, Tampa Bay, Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Vancouver again, and Minnesota again. Some key Western Conference games there for the Los Angeles Kings. For the Vegas Golden Knights, here are the teams that are battling for postseason position that are on their schedule: Tampa Bay, St. Louis, Nashville, Winnipeg, Minnesota, Vancouver twice, Edmonton, Minnesota, Colorado. So they're going to have the tougher road between the 2 teams, but again, it is the team, I think, that has the better idea of what it takes to be ready to go. It was a Vegas team last year that got to the postseason and then turned it to a completely different gear once they got there. So if you gave me one of those 2, said you can only pick one, I'm rolling with the defending Stanley Cup champions. Sorry, Kings fans. You'll probably end up getting it because let's be honest. You're jockeying with the St. Louis Blues and the Minnesota Wilds for that final wild card spot. And so there is a scenario that is a very likely one in which Vegas and the Los Angeles Kings get in. And St. Louis and Minnesota are left sitting on the outside looking in. We'll finish today's show by talking about Jets head coach Rick Bowness, who is stepping away from the team, but response from the team, including the response by Rick Bowness to a recent poor performance, will lead you down the path that they'll be fine in his stead. So we'll finish by discussing that as we continue today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast after this. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is also brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply, and now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Marketing Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial, LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Final segment of today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. And we finished today by talking about Jets head coach Rick Bowness, who is stepping away from the team to attend to a minor medical procedure. The 69-year-old coach, according to the write-up from NHL.com, returned to Winnipeg for treatment and will return once his condition improves. Associate coach Scott Arniel will serve as coach while Bowness is out. Bowness also was away from the team from October 23rd to November 22nd after his wife Judy suffered a seizure. The Jets went 9-2-2 in his absence. And you think about the quotes from various Jets players during that stretch. And I think one of the greatest parts out of that was the response from the Jets players when Bowness returns. They were, they're every player to a man saying that family comes first. And in this case, the person comes first above the team and above what the Jets are trying to accomplish. Adam Lowry, Arnie, and the rest of the coaching staff have done a great job in his absence of getting us prepared, making sure our details are right, and that the messaging stays the same. It's tough to lose the leader on the bench and in the room and everything, but we've got a great supporting staff with the coaches and the leadership group in this room. We're hopefully going to get off to a great start tonight and hopefully put Rick's mind at ease as he recovers. Remember back to the end of the season last year when Rick Bowness said that his team did not perform up to snuff and said that there were players in the locker room that were not carrying their weight, and how pointed we felt those comments were, and how surprising that was to see, because that's just not something, unless it's one of the more vocal coaches in the league, it's just not something you see a ton of. We've gotten to the point through Rick Bowness's leadership that after a particularly rough game for the Winnipeg Jets here recently. Bowness was asked after the game, like, what do you do to try to get things back on track? He said, we don't really do a ton. We as coaches don't really do a ton. You don't have to go into the room and light them up. You expect that the players are going to do what they need to do to ensure that that sort of performance does not become the norm. And he said after the game, it just that type of performance wasn't enough to win hockey games. And so Rick Bowness has changed the culture of this Jets team in the span of one offseason. He's changed the culture of this team from one that was a little on the volatile side last year, especially after the end of the season, but has got those players to buy in. And you look all the way up to the top of the list, guys like Connor Hellebuck, Mark Scheifele, opting to stick around and stay and sign long-term deals with Winnipeg when it looked like their futures were up in the air, when it looked like there was potential that they would not stick around for the long-term plans. They bought in. And I think having those types of guys buy into what a team is doing just helps everybody up and down the lineup do the same. And it's no surprise that the Jets currently 43-19-5, first place in the Central Division. They are in the mix for potentially the number one overall seed in the Western Conference, because Winnipeg Vancouver has been scuffling as of late. And so while they have 92 points right now, you've got the entire trio in the Central Division, all with 91. Winnipeg, Colorado, and Dallas. And Winnipeg has a game in hand on the Vancouver Canucks. And so there is a chance that what a difference a year makes, that the Winnipeg Jets can go from looking like they're going to have to take a major step back, move some pieces, and kind of try to figure out where they go next. They make a surprising trade of Pierre-Luc Dubois to the Los Angeles Kings that ends up being a massive win for them. You get two of your top-level players, your stars, in Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck, to buy in. And all of a sudden, Rick Bowness has that team playing some of the best hockey in the entire NHL and has put a structure in place that even when he is not able to be behind the bench, he's able to, that team just knows what they need to do, and they're able to step up and do it. And so first and foremost, speedy recovery to Rick Bowness. Always a great quote, always a great soundbite after games. And it's no surprise that his Winnipeg Jets team is playing some fantastically good hockey, because he and that upper management group for the Winnipeg Jets, they did some heavy lifting in the offseason to turn that thing around. And so not a surprise that the Jets are focused on business here, but don't be surprised if they don't miss a beat, because that's just how Rick Bowness has structured that team in his tenure there so far. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week with our wide panel of Locked On NHL hosts. We've got you covered, whether it be teams at large, Western Conference, Eastern Conference, power rankings, you name it. Locked On NHL has you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.